All right, good evening. Welcome to tonight's History Pub. Do we have any coffee fans in the house tonight? A few? Okay, great. How many people went back and did the sampling? Do people know that there's a sampling in the back? Maybe you're all too busy with beer on a day like this. Anyway, there's some great samples in the back, so do feel free to take advantage of that. It's great to see you here tonight. My name is Karen Kenzie. I'm one of the coordinators for History Pub. If you haven't been before, just know that we have been putting on the series here at the Kennedy School since 2008. And what we're actually trying to accomplish with the series is to bring you some great Northwest history in a casual setting where you can have a cold beer and some pizza and learn some great Northwest history along the way. And sometimes we actually bring a first-hand account to you so you can learn what it was like for the people who were right there on the front lines experiencing the event, and we certainly have that tonight, so it's really going to be a great program. We always keep these programs free. We do have a donation box back on the information table. There's I think $1 lonely dollar in there right now. If you want to make a donation, just know that we do put all of that money right back into the History Pub series so that we can continue to bring you great programs, and we certainly appreciate the grant support that we get from the Cultural Coalition. The organizations that put on History Pub, we work together collaboratively, and that is obviously McMenamins, Oregon Historical Society, and my organization, which is Holy Names Heritage Center. If you haven't heard of the Heritage Center, we are down in Lake Oswego on the beautiful Merrillhurst campus. The center opened about 8 years ago to house the archives of the Holy Names Sisters, who have been in the Pacific Northwest educating girls since 1859. So you may know them through St. Mary's Academy or Merrillhurst University, or even Mary's Woods Retirement Community. The Heritage Center has three purposes. We house the archives of the sisters. We are a rental venue and a community gathering space. And we also put on public programs. So I'm really thrilled to welcome you to tonight's program. I don't know if any of you are as addicted to coffee as I am, but this is going to be a really great presentation. We're going to hear what it was like when the coffee industry started here in the Pacific Northwest. And again, you're going to hear from the people who were right there from the very beginning. So it's going to be a fantastic program. I'd like to acknowledge Carrie Beaker from McMenamins, who's sitting up here in the front. She did an awful lot of work to put tonight's program together, so thanks a lot, Carrie. And at this point, it is my pleasure to welcome our first speaker to the stage tonight. So it's my pleasure to introduce Kelsey Mutter. Kelsey is the general manager of Roast Magazine, a bi-monthly publication dedicated to the success and growth of the specialty coffee roaster. Kelsey joined the roast team from Portland-based Coffee Bean International, one of the city's largest roasters. So we appreciate having Kelsey here to get us started tonight. Please help me welcome her to the stage.
Hello everyone. On behalf of the Oregon Coffee Board, we would like to thank McMenamins for hosting this History Pub Monday in honor of coffee. Our members are excited to share their experiences with you. The Oregon Coffee Board was founded last year in February. What started as a few coffee roasters sitting in a room discussing how to collaborate and promote Oregon's thriving coffee culture has grown into an organization with an established board of directors and many members for support. The Oregon Coffee Board membership is open to anyone who is interested in coffee, whether you live in Oregon and your business is coffee, or you're just a fan who has 5 cups of coffee daily. By the way, you don't have to drink 5 cups of daily to join. Members for the Oregon Coffee Board meet once a month to discuss ongoing projects in the coffee community. Recently, the Oregon Coffee Board launched the official membership passport for the Oregon Coffee Trail. Purchasing this membership gives you an insider's view on where to sample some of the best coffees in Oregon. With this passport, members have access to discounts, tours, and other offers that not any other coffee enthusiast is given. At our upcoming meeting, we will be discussing an event scheduled for the 30th of May, Coffeelandia. In conjunction with Portland Global Initiatives, the Oregon Coffee Board is hosting a block party on Southeast 7th and Oak Street, complete with live music, beer and liquor, food courts, coffee, and of course a latte art program. A portion of the profits for this event will be given to water projects and coffee communities in Central America. This is an open event and everyone is welcome to attend. Meetings are also open and free to attend, and they happen on the first Wednesday of every month, and we love for anyone to join us for a beer and to chat about this industry that we love. If you'd like more information on the Oregon Coffee Board, please feel free to chat with a few of our members who are stationed in the back of the theater. You'll also find handouts and information in the back, as well as a few membership passports for anybody who might be interested in joining us along the Oregon Coffee Trail. We're also serving, as Karen mentioned, some samples from a few of the brands from the panelists who will be presenting in a short while. You can also visit our website, OregonCoffeeBoard.org, for updates and information on the board. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce Martin Leeker for his presentation on the history of coffee. Martin's passion for and interest in the coffee industry was handed down from his grandfather, Cyril Joseph Kenrick, who worked in coffee and tea in Kenya for more than 40 years. Martin has been roasting coffee for 8 years and currently manages the coffee program for McMenamins. He's also an avid history reader and a singer-songwriter for the pop band The Minders. Please welcome Martin.
Thank you, Kelsey. Hi, you guys. Well, once we get this technical glitch out of the way, tonight I just wanted to introduce and talk about the history of the Portland coffee roasting industry. And just last year I wrote an article for Roast Magazine, and basically the premise for my article was to find out and learn about the industry I worked in, and also to learn about the history of roasting coffee in Portland. And I was pleasantly and just kind of blown away, surprised at how long and how great a history it is. It turns out, just from the meager research that I did into coffee roasting in Portland, that this town has always been a coffee town. I had no idea. I sort of started my research, started backwards from researching Boyd's Coffee, and got over to the Oregon Historical Society and found some really interesting facts. I was really just kind of surprised to find out that Portland had sort of been a mercantile sort of enterprise from the very beginning, from its inception as a town, from its incorporation in 1851 until the turn of the century. Portland really just exploded with growth, which is really fascinating. This slide right here, a commercial emporium, this is from, I believe, 1903, and it illustrates just how quickly and how great of a commercial center Portland as an inland port had become. The reason why I'm showing you this is that coffee had a very big and important part to play. And if you can see, I don't know, it's a little blurry, but in one of these buildings here, there's a Closet and Devers, which was one of the great coffee houses of the 1880s, 1890s in Portland. So with my research, I sort of dug a little deeper. I got to the OHS, the Oregon Historical Society, and sort of looked into various documents and found the Portland Registry, which is kind of a, I don't know, is anyone familiar with the Portland Registry? It's kind of a fascinating document, or a whole bunch of documents. It's sort of like the Yellow Pages before there were Yellow Pages. There's information about every resident in Portland. They go as far back as 1863. And from these documents, from these primary sources, I was able to find some names, and one of them was an A. Benoit, listed as coffee roaster. And from there, I also found another gentleman by the name of J.F. Jones. This gentleman here, who turns out was a Welshman. He came over from Wales with his family in the 1840s and ended up in Portland in the 1850s, basically, late 1850s. Came out here with his new bride to follow the gold rush. And, you know, as I'm sure that most of you are aware, Portland and its mercantile center and its inland port really grew exponentially because of the gold rush in California. And then, of course, obviously, the farming communities and the export of all of the agricultural products from our wonderful valley region. But J.F. Jones, he was a pretty interesting guy, a pretty scrappy guy. He, amongst all of the other merchants that existed along 2nd and Front Street at that time in the 1860s, so this would have been the earliest I can find or found in the records in the Portland Registry, and other records, the Morning Oregonian, and also Euchre's, which was the spice mill or coffee and tea journal, mentioned him also as being one of the first roasters in the town of Portland. He was, amongst all the other merchants on Front Street, really eking out a living. It was a very rough place, really tough environment. His roastery existed on, I believe, 2nd and Front for several years and was burned to the ground in 1873 during the Great Fire of 1873, in August of 1873. And I don't know if you can see in this is from the Morning Oregonian right here, but it states that J.F. Jones, in order to save his business, had to throw some of his mills and his roasting machine into the Willamette so that they wouldn't melt down during the fire. I thought that was really interesting. I mean, that's kind of an amazing little account there, and it kind of gives you a little picture of just how crazy everything must have been back in 1873. A whole 20 blocks of downtown burned to the ground. So J.F. Jones was able to pick himself up from this disaster, and for a while just sold coffee from a small cart on Front Street, I believe. So Portland's coffee roasting industry really got started, or really started to gain steam with this gentleman here, Arthur H. Devers, or I hope I'm not pronouncing this right. Is it Devers or Devers? Does anybody know? Does anybody happen to know? Has anybody ever heard of this guy? No? Is it Devers? Well, Arthur H. Devers, he worked for Folgers in San Francisco. He was a salesman, and he came to Portland to make his fortune in the 1880s. He came up here, obviously by boat, and then part of the journey by stage. And he set up shop, bought, I think, a 50% share in the Closet Brothers Coffee Company, and basically it was a two-man team. His partner, Messrs. Closet, sort of was on the road selling the coffee, and he was the general manager, roaster, and salesperson at the store. Well, Closet & Devers became one of the biggest companies, roasting companies in Portland. Basically, they would sell their wares throughout the Central Valley and then up to Seattle. And, you know, it's interesting to note that I as being an out-of-towner, I'm not from here. I've been here for 17 years. That makes me, I guess, a Portlander now. But I always wondered who came first, Portland or Seattle, when it came to coffee. And it turns out that Portland was more of a coffee center before Seattle. And these guys sold coffee in the Seattle area before there were roasters up there. And you know, Portland being incorporated in 1851 as a town, and Seattle having been incorporated in 1869, much later. And it wasn't really until the Klondike, the gold rush in Alaska got started that Seattle really started to take off as a commercial center. I brought some slides. These are defunct companies now, but these are some of the companies that existed. We have Edwards Coffee Company. There was Defiance Tea and Coffee, Closet Endeavors. I mean, there were several coffee companies that Wadhams and Co., which actually started out as a grocery company. I think a lot of these companies sort of evolved, or at least their coffee departments evolved, out of dry goods. But I thought these ads were extremely interesting, and this is the way it was roughly 130 odd years ago. Well, actually, these are from the 30s, I think, so about 80 years ago, but yeah. Here's another ad from Closet Endeavors. I think they're wonderful. But I know this is very brief, but I wanted to set up and sort of give you guys sort of a picture of, or at least a very brief groundwork of how Portland sort of had its roots. So we had the mercantile shops or centers in what is, well, the original downtown area, Front Street and Second Street. From there you really had the beginnings of this town's coffee industry. All of these companies, incidentally, kind of fell by the wayside, more or less all of them. But we do have one great grand company that survived all of these companies and has been with us for 115 years. And I'd like to introduce Michael Boyd from Boyd's Coffee, who is the great brew buyer for Boyd's and is the president of the Oregon Coffee Board. And I will give him the podium.
Thank you, Mark. So as Martin mentioned, I'm the fourth generation Boyd family member. I'm the green coffee buyer, so I get to play around with coffee all day. One of the best jobs you can have around Portland. My great-grandfather, pictured here in 1909, he immigrated to Portland, and actually the Great Northwest. Don't know exactly where he landed at first, in 1882, when he was 3 years old, from Dunedin, New Zealand. They'd been down there for a couple of years, and they'd come from Edinburgh before that, so they took the long way around to Portland. He got started in a lot of grocery and retail sales around town, particularly with the last one was with Defiance Coffee Company. So he was with them, and then he realized, I can do this on my own. And in February of 1900, with his brother Frank, they started up Boyd Tea, Spice, and Coffee Company. So he went out and he bought a $5 keg horse. It was a keg horse because it came from a brewery, and as he was going around doing deliveries, every time he passed a tavern, the horse would stop. And so the horse just knew his route, and he goes, "This is the tavern, this is where I stop." Another good story I had from him, in early 1900s, one year when the Willamette froze over, he rode the horse and wagon across to Ross Island. I don't know if I'd do that today with everything, but back then Ross Island was a little bit bigger as well. Also, by 1910, he was having his coffee, tea, and spices delivered to far-off locales of Albany, Bend, Eugene, Pendleton, and Walla Walla, Washington. One thing that really kind of struck him as a unique aspect that we still bring forward today within the company is his resourcefulness around brewing equipment. In his early years, coming up with ways to brew coffee and his product to his customers was always difficult. So he started finding old brewing equipment around, and he would fix it up, repair it, and loan it out to his customers. This is a practice we still do today. And as you see here, some pictures from the 40s and 50s, different machines we've designed and developed over the years. And overall, here on the picture on the right, you can see the gentleman in this late 40s, early 50s photo, dressed well as you would on a lot, and just working in the old roastery downtown. And he'd go out there, and it's actually still a practice that's done today where the coffee roasters, more often than not, will supply the brewing equipment to their accounts as long as they buy the coffee. One thing my great-grandfather was also very good with was overall promoting the company. In 1905, we had the Lewis and Clark exposition come through, and dug this out of our archives. You can see on the top left of the screen, Boyd Tea Company. It's a Lewis and Clark map. So getting out there and promoting out the Lewis and Clark exposition for Boyd Tea Company. By the 1950s, we'd really grown a lot into grocery and retail. In 1955, we brought in a canning line, and we had 1 pound and 2 pound cans of coffee. We also, in 1958, had a contest for naming the bird. The couple here, Mr. and Mrs. Spangberg of Kennewick, Washington, are shown here in the news clipping. They gave the winning name Boydie. Boydie the bird. So, and they won the 1958 television for this piece. This is a picture of my grandfather, R.P. Boyd. Anybody who grew up here in the 1950s and 60s probably remember going around collecting Boyd coffee can lids, and then for your church or other nonprofit, you could send them in, and for a 1 pound can lid, you get a nickel, and for a 2 pound can lid, you get a dime. So a great piece to drive repeat business with everything. And so here's my grandfather showing the cases of lids that have been turned in. Though by 1967, we really kind of pulled out of the grocery retail market, as by that time, the red can and blue can guys were really pushing more on price, and the overall quality of the coffee was degrading down to the point where it was not a way we wanted to go to business. So we pulled out of grocery retail and focused back on the food service. Then also for any of you history I've been around from the 50s, remember the Jay Taylor Show. It's one piece we're doing some promotions on and with. And also in this picture I found is a unique piece in that, as my dad tells me, every generation comes along and thinks they can invent coffee. And so in the 1950s, we show here having the pour-over brewing system here from a couple of Chemexes up in the top middle there. And so, having pour-overs is, a great way of doing it today. There's so many different ways to brew coffee, and every generation comes along and makes what is old new again. And then throwing along through here a couple different aspects of promotions that we do. On the left side, have Boydie the bird, showing out different ways for people to collect the lids and out there. And the promotion on the right here is one of my favorites. It's just really reminds me a lot of Mad Men and just that good classic clean design look. And my grandfather was always big on having taglines. Good coffee is good business. Eat out more often. Boyd's Coffee makes the meal. And this actually picture is taken, I believe, in front of the University Club downtown in the 1950s. So here you can see with our transition slide here, this is a picture from 2nd and Southwest Jefferson. So our old roastery in downtown, and we occupied this space from 1935 to about 1970. So going back a few years again, in 1915, there's this photo we acquired from the Oregon Historical Society. Right above the Coca-Cola sign where I had that circle, it's kind of hard to see on the slide here, but it says Boyd Tea Company. So this is one of my great-grandfather's early locations that he had around town. Then by 1935, we moved into this facility here, where we occupied the area between Jefferson and Columbia, 1st and 2nd. It was a very unique facility and very tightly packed in, and I'm thinking about the volume of everything that did in there, and we actually have a few employees that were still with the company that were down in this facility, and talk about how cramped it was, and everything in this place was an overall gravity-fed system. So here's a picture of 1963. They would bring the coffee in on the first floor, have an elevator to raise it up to the second, where all the roasting and grinding was done on the second floor. So with that, with the roasters up there, there are 4 old Probat roasters with open flames underneath the heavy manual lit, and everything in the oversized, manually dumping the coffee, and then also manually just getting everything moving through it. We didn't have the automation that we have today. Also on the second floor, there was 2 lunchrooms, one for men and one for women. It was also the only place in the building where you could smoke. So it was, if you didn't smoke, you're pretty much out of luck. Another interesting piece on that area of the building is that they had filter queens. And this was a group of women whose job it was to sew paper coffee filters. So they would take a sheet of filter paper, cut it into a round section, cut it in half again, and fold it in and make a cone shape and hand stitch it. Before, again, automation that's out there with everything that we have today. Another piece on here is, being in downtown, the 60s and 70s, we didn't quite have the air quality standards that we have today on what we expect out of companies. So on days when we have an air inversion, roasting coffee gives off a lot of smoke when you don't have catalytic converters and afterburners on. So the smoke would come out of the roasters and then drop down onto the city streets, and it would black out the whole city streets. It would be filled with smoke, and would be able to see where you're going. Here's a picture overall in the old facility of dumping green coffee. The process of who's doing it 1 bag at a time. Didn't get this gentleman's name, but found a news article on him. After 26 years working at the company, he retired and he never missed a day of work. And so there's a big article up in the Oregonian and everything on him as well. Up in the roasters room up here where they were doing the 4 Burns roasters, they had open flames underneath there, so it was very prone to fire. So you have an errant spark coming out of an open flame underneath, landing in a cooling tray, you get a lot of fire started with everything. So it was very dangerous in a lot of ways what they were doing. Kind of diving down below underneath there, so after they would do all the roasting and grinding up top, it would drop down into the packaging area down here. And if you look on the top right, you can see the windows going out to the street. So they have all this, what we would consider light industrial work going on right out in the center of downtown Portland on the street side. You can see into the windows. And just to give a piece perspective, this is what the street corner looks like today. So going from this to that. Then also in the 1960s, we also had in 1964, we opened up our retail coffee shop. One of the first, or one of only 3 on the West Coast. There was Freed, Teller, and Freed out of San Francisco, Murchie's in Vancouver, BC, and Boyd's Red Wagon Store in Portland, Oregon. And so we were down here until 1970 when we moved out to our current facility. Here's a picture of it in 1973. And talking to a lot of people that moved out there, they believed that they were all of a sudden swimming in space. The amount of space that we had, everything was spread out, they weren't all cramped in, and they realized we only had 16,000 square feet of office space and 67,000 in warehousing and production. And so over the years, with our continued growth and, that we've been doing, our facility now, we have a 325,000 square feet facility out off 195th and Sandy. So you can still see the old building there to here with everything on, but just overall growth's been great. And also another piece I'm going to bring into it before we get into our overall roundtable with everybody is talk about the beginnings of the specialty coffee movement. It really kind of started within about early 80s when traction really started coming in and people started wanting a better cup of coffee. In 1984, Boyd's launched out a whole bean grocery program. This is really new, and we see it everywhere today, but back in the 1984, this is brand new. You go in there and get your whole bean coffee. As you can see, everything that's around there on this presentation it's all just canned coffee out there. and it was really just a unique aspect. Another piece down below, like kind of funny story, is we had like a 10-ounce retail bag as well, which had a one-way valve on it to allow the coffee to degas and escape out of it. We got a letter in after we launched out the valves, and from a customer said, "I love your coffee, but I can't buy anymore because I can't get the coffee out of the valve," as opposed to just cutting the bag open. Also really getting into office coffee and really getting back into brewing systems. This here shows the first AirPod brewing system that my father and our head engineer and our partner company, Bravler, in the Netherlands, designed up on the back of a napkin. Before this, a couple reasons were done in order to create this up. The amount of cost of air conditioning and the heat that you create off of having coffee brewed into a glass decanter and sitting on a burner that's actually giving off heat, whereas here it would go into a glass-lined AirPod where it could be sealed in there and sit comfortably for a good 2 hours, whereas on a burner, coffee's really only good for about 10 minutes until you need to have a drink. So it's several aspects on it. We also forgot to patent it when we designed it, so little things. And so for anybody in here who went to Lincoln High School, they'll remember this store. In 1985, we came back into bringing the coffee shops back into Portland. Our first one that we brought back in was here at Southwest 15th and Taylor. I remember going around, being at this party and being under strict orders not to get in trouble. But going around, and we would have these stores going around before all the coffee shops were on every street corner as they are today. It was really everybody coming in and figuring out how this going to play out. It was a very much interesting story, which I'm sure we'll get into with everybody else too. Another piece that I remember a lot from the early days, especially coffee, in the late 80s, early 90s, you would have coffee carts out on every street corner around Portland, it seemed. You'd go out there and people would have their carts with their umbrellas above them year-round, and you could go out and get your good cup of coffee because there weren't coffee shops everywhere. And then finally jumping forward 30 years to today, Boyd's continue to redefine ourselves, embrace our culture, our history with everything. This is a billboard we did for the Specialty Coffee Association, which we were the host sponsor for back in 2012 here in Portland. As part of when we were doing a big rebrand and we're having fun with our history, branding 115-year-old company is not all that easy. So as we came up with it, established 1900 seriously, and just having a lot of fun with us and who we are, and having fun with coffee on a daily basis. And so with that, I'm going to lead it on, and the rest of the panelists will be able to come up, and we're going to get everything going.
You can open up the... While we're opening that up, I'll just do a brief introduction to myself, and I'll let these guys introduce themselves in a minute. My name is Mark Stell. I'm the co-founder. I think somebody just pushed me in the way. We're very friendly competitors here. I'm the co-founder of Portland Roasting Coffee. I started Portland Roasting in '96. I had a small roaster retail before that, and it's interesting hearing Michael talk, because I think he may be the first kind of real Portlander, the TV series Portlandia, because they actually put a bird on their product, and that is, put a bird on it, it'll sell. That's actually probably something you should look into, maybe they may coin that phrase. So today I run Portland Roasting with 50 employees. We're 18 years as of this year. About 8 years ago, I bought into a coffee farm in Tanzania. I've kind of slowly vertically integrated it. We have some retails now, so I think we're at that point where Portland Roasting has one retail and a couple at the convention center, and hopefully some more down the road here. I think the most exciting thing about tonight is what you're about to hear is this diversity in our business, and so we've asked a series of companies to come in and kind of describe what they've been through and where they're at, and we have some great companies here, and I'm going to ask them to introduce themselves, but basically their company, their role, and what type of coffee business they have, and then I'll ask another question.
Starting from the left, I'm Dan Welch with World Cup Coffee. We are a company that began long before we owned it. My dad bought it in 1985, and I started working for him basically before I could drive because he needed inexpensive child labor to wash glass pots and clean the floors, do accounting, and move on up through anything basically that needed to be done. You wear many hats when you're a small company. Since then, we've grown from our basic beginnings of 3 companies, my dad, myself, and a service technician, to about 35 employees, 2 retail shops, roasting coffee, which was very unique for our style of company, which is particularly strictly office coffee services. We began roasting in 1993, which was a fantastic time to get in the coffee roasting industry. As many of you coffee geeks know, that's kind of when things really began to take off. And then we began our retail experiment in 1999, and that was a great time to really start off in retail as well. A feather in our cap at that time was winning the top 10 in the nation of new coffee retail establishments by USA Today. Today we now have 2 retail establishments and roast really right next to McMenamin's Mission Theater at Northwest 18th and Gleason, and really enjoy our time.
My name is Bruce Miletto, and I've been involved in the industry for about 23 years. Got involved in the industry by importing coffee from Italy, and realized coming back to the United States that the word cappuccino in Italy was a totally different drink here in the United States. And so I opened 4 coffee locations, retail locations, down in Eugene. And I finally opened my last location up here in Portland, and that was what I was going to pursue. I planned on pursuing like opening retail locations. And then I realized there was this lack of education in the industry. And so I started a company, while I still own 4 locations, called Bellissimo Coffee Info Group. And I went around to trade shows with this card that said Bruce Miletto, President of Bellissimo Coffee Info Group, and it said coffee education on it. And I would go up to coffee roasters, I'd go up to machine dealers at their booths at various trade shows, and every single person would ask me, what is coffee education? Those 2 words really had not been put together other than by one gentleman over in Trieste, Italy, called Dr. Ernesto Ely. He was the only person doing coffee education that I knew of in the entire world. And I had Dr. Ely became a friend, he became a mentor to me, and so I started this company and I tried to figure out how I could get this information out to people, because myself and other people in the industry all agreed that at least 95% of all the specialty coffee locations were not producing the product right. So we're dealing with a product here in coffee that you can take the very best coffee in the world, you can take the most expensive machine in the world, and it comes down to that last 30, 40 seconds in that espresso machine, and it can be ruined. It's the only product I know of that can happen. So I was unsure really how to get this information out. I thought I could write some books. That was what I started doing. And then I had a film background because my